بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه وله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Welcome to Usul al-Fiqh class. Inshallah, we'll continue the discussion of the qiyas. And after we covered the first two elements of qiyas, the original case and the hukum, we are moving now to the new case, what we call al-fara'. The original case, it is the asl, origin, and we have the fara', the branch, the new case. What are the conditions for the new case? The first condition, it must not be covered by the text or ijma'. Simply we are doing qiyas here, and qiyas means analogy. You use analogy when there is no text. If this new case is covered by one of those, text or ijma', it is not a new case anymore. It's already covered. So we don't need to do analogy. This is the first condition. The second condition, it cannot be preceding to the original case. I think this condition is not mentioned in the book. I'm not sure. The book mentioned 3 conditions. What do we mean by that? You have original case. And based on the original case, you are making analogy to give ruling to the new case. If that new case was before the original case, it cannot be new case anymore. It doesn't make sense. So it has to be later. This new case has to be later. Chronological, order, that's what we're saying later. The third condition, the effective cause must be in the same way as to the original case. They are in the same way, the effective cause. And the ruling, the same thing, it must be similar. You cannot say, based on analogy, the original case is haram, so the new case is halal. Then what analogy are you making? You say, based on the prohibition, this is prohibited. Based on the abomination, this is abominated. But you say, based on the prohibition, this is halal, that's not a new case. These are the conditions for the new case. So now we have original case, we have the ruling of the original case, we have the new case. What is left is the illah, the effective cause. And that's the main issue. That's the most important topic. And as the author here says, this is perhaps the most important of all the requirements of qiyas, the illah, the effective cause. So before we take the conditions, what do we mean by the illah? What do we mean by the illah? The cause of the hukum. What does that mean?
What the first case, what made it halal, haram, has to have.
What has the implication or the influence to give a ruling to a case? The effective cause, scholars differed extensively on the definition of it, because to many of them it is the objective. What's the illah for shortening the prayer while traveling? Make it easy. Wrong. To make it easy. That means if the traveling is easy, you don't shorten the prayer. If you say that's the effective cause, right? If you say prayer while traveling is shortened because of ease, then any traveling that is not easy, that is easy, you don't shorten the prayer. Because the ruling always goes with the effective cause. Once there is effective cause, there is ruling. Once the effective cause is not there, the ruling is not there. That's what scholars say. So we need to find another effective cause. So what's the definition? Again, illa in Arabic literally it is the thing that causes change. That's why sickness in Arabic called what? Illa. Sickness in Arabic called illa. And therefore the sick person is called alil, marid. He is sick. Why? Because sickness changes the healthy person. That's what it does. Another term is used in Arabic, alal ba'd al-nahl. When someone drinks and then he comes again and again. Why? Because the effective cause is always there. It is with the ruling. But in the technical term, in Usul al-Fiqh, that's the most common definition. الوصف الظاهر المنضبط المناسب للحكم. The attribute which is constant and evident and bears a proper relationship to the text. The attribute which is constant and evident and bears a proper relationship to the text. That's the effective cause. Let's go back to our example. Shortening the prayers in traveling. What's the effective cause here? If we look at this definition. Traveling itself. So whenever you are traveling, what? You shorten the prayer. So there is a relationship between this illah, which is traveling, and the ruling, which is shortening. Whenever there is traveling, there is what? There is shortening. Traveling is what? It is attribute. You are traveling. And it is verb. Is it evident or no? It is evident. You can limit it. You can say this is traveling, this is not traveling. You know what is the effective cause. It is traveling. So that's the definition of illah. Now, based on that, what are the conditions? Or before this even. As I told you, there is difference between illah and wisdom. Now, what Shakib said, it is ease. Ease is an objective. It is not cause. You shorten the prayer while traveling, so it will become easy for you. Right? So, is the effective cause the same as the wisdom, the objective? They are different. Let's take another example. Drinking wine. What's the effective cause for prohibition? Intoxication. So, every time there is intoxication, the ruling is what? Prohibition. Why? When you say why, that's the objective. Why? It covers the brain, it harms the body. All these are objectives, but they are not the illah, because if you say the illah, anything that has the same objective will become prohibited. So there is difference. Sometimes they are the same, the objective and the illah are the same. But the rulings of Sharia, they are based on the wisdom or on the effective cause? Based on the illah. The rulings of Sharia are based on the effective cause, not on the wisdom. Online, we are in class and you are talking. Okay. So, what are the conditions for the illah? First, it must be constant and applicable to all cases. Again, we want to derive a ruling. That ruling is the same. If this illah is not constant, it is not applicable, then the ruling has to be different. Because the basis of the ruling is the illah. There is illah, there is ruling. If there is no illah, the ruling is not there. It must be applicable to all cases. Number two, it must be evident. What do we mean by evident? You know what is the illah. If I ask you why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade this, and you say, I don't know. We don't know. That means you cannot come and say, based on that ruling, prohibition, this is prohibited. Why? What is the illah? We don't know. So there is no ruling. The illah has to be evident. It could not be something that you doubt. You cannot speculate what is the illah. It has to be evident. Number three, it must be a proper attribute. And the last one, it must be transient. What do you mean by that? The last condition, it's a bit difficult and there is disagreement amongst the scholars. That's the opinion of Abu Hanifa rahimahullah and some scholars. The majority, they did not take this condition. What do we mean by muta'addiya? That's what we call al-illa al-qasira and al-illa al-muta'addiya. Now, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade, or let's give you a practical example, that will make it easier for you. The impurity of what is coming from one of the outlets of the body. Why it is impure? Why is it impure? Filth. If you say filth, then everything that is coming filthy from the body causes what? The nullification of the wudu. Some scholars say no. The illah here is what? The coming from the outlet. That's the place. Because of that, you cannot make analogy, because this is the place. This is illah qasira. It is not transient. Anything coming from that outlet, because of the outlet itself, you don't make analogy on this. Others said no. Anything that is coming from the body that is impure causes what? Nullification of wudu. And based on that, we have the common issue. Blood, bleeding. Blood is impure or pure? It is impure. All agreed, it is impure. Does it invalidate wudu or no? Some say yes, some say no. So, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes something prohibited, for that particular reason, now that reason is not available there. Can you make analogy on it or no? Abu Hanifa rahimahullah and others say no. The illah has to be transient. Muta'addiya. Others say no. The illah for that reason, for itself, it is valid and we can make analogy based on it. So, let's read it from the book. It will make it clearer, inshallah. Page 275, the first condition. Open the book, page 275.
According to the majority of the ulama, the illah must be a constant attribute, which is applicable to all cases without being affected by the differences of persons, time, place, and circumstances. The Malikis and the Hanbalis, however, do not agree with this requirement, as they maintain that the illah need not be constant and that it is sufficient if the illah bears a proper or reasonable relationship to the hukm. The difference between the two views is that the majority distinguish the effective cause from the objective of the law and preclude the latter from the scope of the illah. The illah is constant if it applies to all cases regardless of circumstantial changes. To give an example, according to the rules of preemption...
Shuf'a. Do you know what is shuf'a? Okay. Shuf'a is ruling when you have co-partnership. And pay attention to this. I will not repeat it again. You have partnership with someone in the land. Do you want to type or you want to listen? Close the book, please. Everyone, close the book. Online, type 1, all of you. Shuf'a, when you have co-partnership, you have piece of land, 2 acres. And you have a partner. This partner has 1 acre and you have 1 acre. This is your lot. Or you both have a slave. This slave is owned 50% by you and 50% by another person. Now, your partner decided to sell his share, 50%. Would that affect you or no? Of course, because you have co-partnership. So he cannot do so without letting you know. You have the priority over others. He may choose to sell, because again, it is partnership. He owns that 50%, but it is co-partnership. That's the shuf'a. If he wanted to sell, he has to tell you, I want to sell. If you tell him, go ahead, I don't need this 50%, he can sell it. If you sold it without letting him know, he has the option to invalidate this selling. Why? Why he has this option? Because of the harm that is caused on him. Now, this harm, is it certain or it is expected? Expected. Why? Because that part which is sold, maybe the co-owner, the new co-owner, maybe he's better than the X one, right? But what's the reason for this? It is the co-ownership itself, the co-partnership. That's the reason of the shuf'a. That's the effective cause. It is not the harm that is expected. Whoever says it is the harm that is expected, they say it doesn't have to be proper attribute, which is the opinion of Maliki and Hanbali. Abu Hanifa rahimahullah and Imam Shafi rahimahullah and others, they say it has to be proper attribute. Now continue, and now it will be clear for you the example that he mentioned. Page 275.
The illah is constant if it applies to all cases regardless of circumstantial changes. To give an example, according to the rules of preemption, shuf'a, the joint or neighboring owner of a real property has priority in buying the property whenever his partner or his neighbor wishes to sell it.
He cannot sell without letting you know. Why? Because you are his co-partner, you are his co-owner.
The illah in preemption is joint ownership itself, whereas the hikmah of this rule is to protect the partner, neighbor, against possible harm that may arise from the sale to a third party. Now the harm that the lawgiver intends to prevent may materialize or it may not.
Yeah, maybe you could have a better owner or a better neighbor, but you don't know.
As such, the hikmah is not constant and may therefore not constitute the illah of preemption. Hence, the illah in preemption is joint ownership itself, which, unlike the hikmah, is permanent and unchangeable, as it does not fluctuate with such changes in circumstances. The majority view maintains that the rules of Sharia are found on their cases, ilal, not in their objectives, hikmah. From this, it would follow that a hukm shari is present whenever its illah is present, even if its illah is not, and a hukm shari is absent in the absence of its illah, even if its hikmah is present.
Okay, is this example clear? Another example to clarify it, the same issue, next page, the issue of traveling. 276, the bottom, the paragraph to give an example, the permission granted to travelers, in the middle.
To give an example, the permission granted to travelers to break the fast while traveling is to relieve them from hardship. This is the hikmah of this ruling. But since hardship is a hidden phenomenon and often varies according to persons and circumstances, it may not constitute the effective cause of an analogy. The concession is therefore attached to traveling itself, which is the illah, regardless of the degree of hardship that it may cause to individual travelers.
Okay, he gave another beautiful example from our lifetime. Forget about the Sharia ahkam. Let's talk about the law itself. Now, why crossing the traffic light is a violation?
Danger to others.
Danger to others. What if it was 1 a.m. and you see the entire street and there is no one and you crossed the red light? Will you still get a ticket or no?
Yes.
Why? Yes. If you said because to protect others' life, right? Here, it is not there. There is no danger. So why you are still getting a ticket?
Because it's the establishment of the law.
Exactly. So whenever you cross the red light, it is violation. The objective is what? To protect others' lives. So the ruling is based on what? On the objective or on the cause, the effective cause? On the effective cause. Okay, this is the first condition. Number 2, page 277.
As already stated, the effective cause on which an analogy is based must also be evident.
Zahir. Evident. You know what is it. Otherwise, you cannot make analogy. Well, this is the analogy. Based on what? I don't know. The effective cause has to be clear.
Hidden phenomena such as intention, goodwill, consent, etc., which are not clearly ascertainable, may not constitute the illah of an analogy.
Okay, I think this is very clear. Move to the next condition.
The third condition of illah is that it must be a proper attribute, in that it bears a proper and reasonable relationship to the law of the text. This relationship is munasib when it serves to achieve the objective of the lawgiver.
You cannot make analogy and you say, based on the prohibition of alcohol, every beverage is prohibited. Can you do that? Why? Now, if you forbid every beverage, won't you preserve the minds? Won't you guarantee that there will be no intoxication? Will you or will you not?
Yes.
You will. But on the other hand, did you achieve the objective? You did not, because you are causing by another way harm.
This relationship is the munasib when it serves to achieve the objective of the lawgiver, which is to benefit the people and to protect them against harm. For example, killing is a proper ground on which to exclude an heir from inheritance. For the basis of succession is the tie of kinship which relates their heir to the deceased, which is severed and nullified by killing. Similarly, the intoxicating effect of wine is the proper cause of its prohibition, An attribute that does not bear a proper relationship to the hukm does not qualify as an illah.
Okay, the next. And that's the most difficult one, and that's where many scholars have reservations and... Go ahead, read.
The illah must be transient, that is, an objective quality which is transferable to other cases. For analogy cannot be
As I gave you the example, can you transfer the outlet to another thing? You can't because it is a new body. So you cannot say based on that, this is also prohibited. It's not transferable. So can you make analogy on it? According to Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, no, you cannot. According to the majority, yes, you still can.
For analogy cannot be constructed on an illah which is confined to the original case only. As the Hanafis explain, the very essence of illah, as much as that of qiyas in general, is its capacity of extension to new cases, which means that the illah must be a transferable attribute. Traveling, for example, is the illah of a concession in connection with fasting. As such, it is an illah which is confined to the asl and cannot be applied in the same way to other devotional acts. Similarly, if we were to confine the illah in the prohibition of intoxicants to wine derived from grapes, we would be precluding all the other varieties of intoxicants from the scope of the prohibition. Transferability.
Do you understand what he meant by that? If he said the illah, if it were to be the intoxication of that juice, grape, then it will be confined only to it. But since intoxication is not limited, it's not confined only to the squeeze that is made out of grape, it is to any other beverage, it is transient, it is not confined.
I'm confused. The Hanafis are the ones who said that
the illah has to be transient. Other scholars say no. Now, again, why they say no? Now, when they say the outlet, yes, it is not muta'addi, but we can make the analogy. How? Omar, you are paying attention?
yeah, very much.
How? They say, what is coming from the outlet? We understand what is it. So we can make analogy. If it's good for one ruling, it is good for another ruling. Read the second paragraph on the page 278.
The requirement of ta'adiyah would imply that the illah of analogy must be an abstract quality and not a concrete activity or object. To illustrate this, we may again refer to the foregoing examples. Traveling, which is a concession in connection with fasting, is a concrete activity, whereas intoxication is an abstract quality that is not confined in its application. Similarly, in the hadith regarding usury, the illah of its ruling, which prohibits quantitative excess in the sales of 6 specified articles, is the quality of such articles being saleable by the measurement of weight or capacity and not their particular species. The hadith thus provides that gold for gold, silver for silver, wheat for wheat, barley for barley, dates for dates, and salt for salt must be equal for equal, hand to hand. Transactions in these commodities must, in other words, be without excess on either side, and delivery shall be immediate. Otherwise, the transaction will amount to usury, which is forbidden. The illah of this prohibition is none of the concrete objects that are specified, but an attribute or a concept that applies to all, namely their salability by capacity or weight.
Okay. You still have some difficulty understanding this condition? Good. Next.
Finally, the effective cause must not be an attribute that runs counter to or seeks to alter the law of the text. To illustrate this, we may refer to the story of a Maliki judge who was asked by an Abbasid ruler about the penance, kafara, or having conjugal relation.
This is a famous case that happened during the time of the Khalifa. This Khalifa, what did he do? In Ramadan, he broke his fast by having sexual activity. Now, what did this judge tell him? Now, the ruling is what when this happens?
60 days.
Kafara. What's the kafara? Wrong. It is not 60 days. There is order.
Feeding 60 days.
No. You free a slave. Then you fast 60 days. If you could not, then you feed. You don't choose to feed first. Now this judge, what did he do? He said this Khalifa is very rich and freeing a slave for him is nothing. So he told him you have to fast 60 days. Can you do that? Can you do that? No. Why? It's going against the rules of Sharia. Because there is order. So the illah has to coincide with the rules of Sharia. It cannot be altering or changing or against the rules of Sharia. So these are the conditions of the illah. Now, how do we know what is the illah? How do we know that fasting or traveling is the illah for shortening the prayer, for breaking your fast? It is not difficulty. How do we know? There are many ways to know the illah. That's what we call in Arabic masalik al-illah. In Usul al-Fiqh, masalik al-illah. Here, what did he say? It is identification of the illah. How do we know the illah? Actually, this is what I added, and I want you to add this condition. Now, when we say this is the effective cause, what if a ruling has two effective causes? The illah is based on what? Which one of them? Stronger one. You cannot take weaker effective cause while there is a stronger effective cause. This is the one that I added. Do you know how many conditions for the illah in the books of Usul? In one book, Irshad al-Fuhul for Shawkani, I don't think I have it here. It is in my house. 24 conditions. 24 conditions. But they are not all agreed upon by scholars. And that's why the issue of qiyas is difficult. You have really to have ability to make analogy, to understand the objectives, the reasons, to be able to make the comparison. But those, most scholars agreed on all of them, on all these 6 conditions. Yet even as you saw, the 4th one, أن تكون متعدية, there is difference of opinions about it. And the rest, of course, there is difference also. Now, again, how do we know the illah? Masalik al-illah. There are many ways. In the book here, I think he mentioned he did not list them. I don't see a number, but let's see how many I mentioned. Ijma'. How do you know this is the illah? Through ijma'. When there is a consensus that this is the illah. Or through the nas, the text, explicit text. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam state that this is the illah. Now, which one comes first? Nas or ijma'? Nas or ijma'? Scholars again differed. Some of them put the nas first. Of course, the level of the Quran or Sunnah is higher than ijma'. But why they put ijma'? Because it is certain. Nas, it is also certain. It is from the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the understanding of the nas could be speculative. People could argue. Now, in the hadith of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, why he asked people to knock on the door to seek permission? the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّمَا جُعِلَ الْإِسْتِئْذَانِ مِنْ أَجْلِ الْبَصَرِ. So you don't see something that you're not allowed to see. That's the effective cause. What's the objective? Protect your privacy, not being involved in any sin against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These are all objectives. The Prophet ﷺ in this hadith, did he state or not the illah? He mentioned the illah. Sometimes the ruling is there, but the illah is not there. So how you extract it, that's your job. Here comes the job. Now, there are many ways to know the illah. Again, the first one is ijma' or nas, and the second one is ijma'. Scholars differed. Some of them put this first, some of them put that first. The illah could be alluded to. Again, just like the ruling in the text. It is not clear or it's not explicit, but it is implied. The issue is when we don't have these three things. These are the three things that are mentioned in the book. Some scholars, again, they mentioned 11 ways to know the illah. There are 11 ways. By the action of the Prophet ﷺ. When he does something and you know from it, that's the reason. That's the effective cause. By elimination. That's what we call in Arabic as-sabr wa taqsim. Exploration and division. You know what does that mean? Do you know what does that mean? When you say it is haram, there are two possibilities. If this possibility, that means this or that. And it is, both of them are not valid. So it's not that this possibility, it is the other one. That's what we call sabr and taqsim. Rule of elimination. You came late. Either you had an accident or you did not want to come to class. When you limit the options and you drop one of them by the other, then the last one which is left, that's what? The illah. This is a method. Another procedure is called al-munasaba. The proper relation. This should be the illah. Why? Because it has relationship. As we said, the illah has to have a proper relationship. When you don't find the direct explicit text, but you find that it is suitable, so you say that's the illah. Again, this is for you to go beyond the subject of the book. But I don't know how much can you go further if you don't have other books of usul written in English. At least let's know these three ones. But actually, as I said, your work comes when they are not mentioned. Because if they are mentioned, then there is no argument. You know the illah, you just make the analogy and that's it. If the other one agrees with you on the illah, then he has to agree on the new case. You tell him, isn't the new case having the same effective cause? If he said yes, then it is done. The ruling is there. But when the illah is not clear, it is not explicit. Now, we will take an example about extracting the illah. And that's what he mentioned here in the book. Page 282. And please follow the reading. It is very, very important. In the middle of the page.
When the illah is neither stated nor alluded to in the text.
Okay, so you don't have the illah stated, nor it is alluded to. What do you do?
Then the only way to identify it is through ijtihad.
You have to make your own judgment to extract the illah. Okay.
The jurist thus takes into consideration the attributes of the original case, and only the attribute which is considered to be proper, nasib, is identified as the illah. For example, in the hadith referred to above concerning the penance of conjugal relations during daytime in Ramadan, it is not precise.
This is the example. Now let me tell you this. You all know the hadith of the case of the Bedouin. When he came to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the companions gave the description with his hair uncombed, he is in a hurry. He told the Prophet ﷺ, جامعت أهلي في نهار رمضان وأنا صائم. He told him what happened. What did the Prophet ﷺ tell him? أعتق رقبة. He has to free a slave. Why? He had sexual intercourse with his wife in the morning of Ramadan while he was what? Fasting. What did the Prophet ﷺ say? Free a slave. How can we establish a ruling where anyone who did that action, he has to free a slave? We need to extract the effective cause. What's the effective cause? He's a Bedouin, right? Isn't that an attribute? Yes or no?
Yeah.
He wasn't a Bedouin. Do we say every Bedouin has to free a slave? Is that effective cause? What if he was civilian? Does the rule still apply?
Yes.
So that is ineffective. We eliminate that. Okay, what else? What's the effective cause in this hadith? That's what I want you to extract.
While fasting during Ramadan.
Sexual relation
While fasting.
during the month of Ramadan. Very good. So we have actually 3 attributes together. That's the illah. Because if you say sexual relation only, what about the evening of Ramadan? Right?
Right.
It is ineffective. Okay, if you say fasting, what about the one who has sexual relation with his wife in other than Ramadan? Does the ruling still apply or no? Again, some scholars differed. And based on the illah here, because is Ramadan effective or no? The sanctity of Ramadan. Omar, are you here?
Yeah, I'm reading the book.
I don't want you to read the book.
In not traveling or sick, how can you do that?
The same thing, what if someone was traveling in Ramadan? Now, as a traveler, do you have the option to break your fast? Yes. So what if you had sexual relation? It is Ramadan, but you're not fasting. It's still okay. So what's the proper illah here? Sexual intercourse in the day of Ramadan while fasting. Okay, while fasting. If you are a traveler and you are fasting, yet you had this thing, do you still free a slave or no? Again, an issue of difference. Since you originally had the option to break your fast. Okay, now, as the companion mentioned, وَقَعْتُ أَهْلِي, I had sexual relation with my wife. Is this an effective cause?
Yeah, well,
I don't know.
because if it wasn't,
What if it was not the wife?
it would be a different,
What if it's not the wife?
It's a different punishment.
So it is not freeing a slave.
If it's a prohibited sexual relation, it's a different punishment.
Double.
Okay, now this process that we just did, what do we call this? Actually, there are 3 steps. 3 steps to make this analogy, to extract the effective cause and apply it. Read.
Extracting the illah. Extracting the illah, or takhrij al-manat, is in fact the starting point in the inquiry into the identification of illah, and often precedes tanqih al-manat.
Takhrij al-manat. Takhrij, extract. You are trying to extract what? The illah, the effective cause.
In all cases where the text or ijma does not identify the effective cause, the jurist extracts it by looking at the relevant causes via the process of ijtihad. He may identify more than one cause, in which case...
Actually, okay, go back. You skipped, go back to page 282, last 2 paragraphs. Tanqih al-manat.
Tanqih al-manat implies...
We have 3 things. Tanqih al-manat, takhrij al-manat, tahqiq al-manat.
implies that...
Takhrij is to extract. You are trying to extract the illah. While you extract, just imagine you have gold. You are in a mine and you want to extract gold. You search. You're searching for minerals. But what mineral do you want? Gold. When you take it, is it automatically purified or it has some other minerals with it? There are others. What do you do to purify the gold? Now you extracted it. That's takhrij. We are trying to see what are the effective causes. After we see what are the effective causes, we do the polishing. Tanqih al-manat. Tanqih al-manat is when you eliminate any ineffective attribute. Tahqiq al-manat, when you apply the effective cause. When you say, this is the illah, so that's the ruling. Whoever had sexual relation with his wife during the day of Ramadan should free a slave. That's tahqiq al-manat. So there are three things. We have takhrij, we have tanqih, and we have tahqiq. So read the last two paragraphs, page 282.
Tanqih al-manat implies that a ruling may have more than one cause. And the mujtahid...
Just like here, is it one cause only? If you say fasting, then everyone who's fasting has to free a slave if he violated the fast. And no one says that. If you say intercourse, then any intercourse, whether it is in the evening or in the day, whether it is Ramadan or out Ramadan, it is. So we have actually more than one.
And the mujtahid has to identify the one that is proper, munasib, as was the case in the foregoing examples. Literally, tanqih means connecting the new case to the original case by eliminating the discrepancy between them. Tanqih al-manat is thus mainly concerned with identifying the correct illah from a range of attributes that are...
Just when you have gold with copper, with aluminum, and you want to extract the gold only. You're not concerned with copper, with any other mineral. That's tanqih. Same thing, we want the effective cause. We don't want any other thing.
From a range of attributes that are indicated in the text. In this sense, tanqih al-manat is almost exclusively concerned with the textually indicated illah, and the mujtahid ascertains the most appropriate of the various alternatives. To give an example, we may refer to the hadith in which a Bedouin came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, I had a deliberate conjugal relations with my wife in daytime in Ramadan. Then the Prophet ﷺ said to him, Man mu'it a slave. The text here indicates several possibilities to identify the illah, some of which are not appropriate to the ruling it contains. The fact, for example, that he was a Bedouin is not relevant to the hukm, nor the fact that he had intercourse with his wife, not with a stranger, that is. The effective illah is, therefore, deliberate intercourse in the daytime of the fasting month, and this is the only cause for the expiation that is prescribed in the hadith. Okay,
so that's the illah. Other than that, anything else is ineffective. So adding it to the illah is incorrect. What did we do to get that illah? We extracted and we purified, we polished. So we did takhrij and we did what? Tanqih. Now when we apply this illah and we say whoever did that, this is his ruling. When someone comes and says that's what I did and you apply it, that's what we call tahqiq al-manat. You are applying it, implementing the illah.
When the mujtahid has isolated this as the effective cause, he has completed the procedure that is involved in taqih al-manat. Extracting the illah or takhrij al-manat is in fact the starting point in the inquiry into the identification of illah and often precedes tanqih al-manat. In all cases where the text or ijma' does not identify the effective cause, the jurist extracts it by looking at the relevant causes via the process of ijtihad. We may identify more than one cause, in which case he has completed one step involved in takhrij al-manat and must move on to the next stage, which is to isolate the proper cause. To illustrate this, the prohibition of usury in wheat and 5 other articles is laid down in the hadith.
Okay, this is another example. Now, didn't the Prophet ﷺ forbid the transactions, gold with gold, silver with silver, wheat with wheat? What's the illah? What's the effective cause? You need to extract it, and you need to purify it. We have 2 things now, tanqih and takhrij. So what's the illah? In gold and silver. And in the other 4 types.
Inflation or something?
Inflation. So anything, if you say inflation, anything that causes inflation, you have to deal with it equally.
The same commodity of lesser quality
Okay.
in one.
Okay, that means if I have a camera and I come and I trade my camera with your camera for extra money, that's riba, and no one says that. Is it permissible? You have old camera, analog, I have digital camera, HD. I come to you and you say, I want your new camera, take my old camera and I'll pay you extra. Based on that, it is riba, while no one says it is riba. So what's the effective cause? That's what I want you to think of. It is known. That's now when you know this, you know the subject. You know what is tahqiq al-manat, tanqih al-manat, and takhrij al-manat. Scholars differed though. Regarding dhahab, gold and silver, they said the illah here is thamaniya, the value of the money. So anything has value and people are trading with it, it has to be hand with hand, like cash. Nowadays, how do we deal with money? Do we deal gold, 2 coins of gold, or $2, $3? Cash. So these dollars, I cannot come and tell you this is one bill, $100, because it is one. I will take from you separate bills, 101. Some people do that when they have coins, right? When you want to make a phone call and you are in need of coins. You don't have coins, you have only paper. You come, just like in the machines, in the stores. You go there, you put $1, cents, and nickels, and they give you cash, right? You want to get rid of these nickels. Actually, they take some money. That's riba. Why? Because this is money for money, it has to be equal. If you change the effective cause, you say it is not the thamaniya, it is not the money, it is something else, you may not say it is riba. Let's go to the food. What's the reason in the food? Dates for dates, something you eat. That means anything you eat, you cannot exchange it for. So I cannot give you 2 apples for 3 apples. Or I cannot give you, in food, most scholars said it is qut muddakhar. The ability, that food is the food, the main food, the people that eat, and it is, you are able to save it. It is saved. Other than that, it is permissible. So there is no riba in ma'dudat, in counted things. Things that you count, like pens. 5 pens for 4 pens. That's permissible. But it is by weight. You cannot get 5 kilograms or 5 pounds of apple. You cannot exchange that for 3 pounds of better quality of apple. That is riba. Why these rulings? Based on the illah. The Prophet ﷺ did not mention apple. He did not mention the apple. So do we say there is riba or no? Did the Prophet ﷺ mention dollars in his hadith? No. He mentioned what? Gold and silver. So if you come and say it is riba also, you need an evidence. Based on what? Now, can you come and give $100 and take $95 currency or opposite? Why not? Someone says it is service. Actually, it is riba. It is riba. But why? You have no evidence but this hadith. And this hadith does not mention cash. It mentions the essence of it. And you need to make qiyas. So when you extract the illah and you specify it, this is the illah, you did two things, تخريج المناط and تنقيح المناط. When you apply it on cash, that is what? تحقيق المناط. Okay, continue. I hope it is clear now. Continue what he said about riba. When the jurists seek...
When the jurists seek to draw an analogy between wheat and raisins...
Are the raisins mentioned in the hadith? No. So how can we make analogy, relationship between both of them? Yeah. Go ahead, read.
To determine, for example, whether one should apply the tax of 1/10 by analogy to raisins, the illah may be any of the following: that both of them sustain life, that they are edible, that they are both grown in the soil, or that they are sold.
Imagine if you say they both grow in soil. Then anything that grows in soil is riba. So you cannot exchange two trees for one tree. Yeah, because you have to be consistent when you say this is the illah. Okay.
Thus, for the jurist has completed the first step, namely extracting the illah. But then he proceeds to eliminate some of these by recourse of tanqih al-manat. The first illah is eliminated because salt, which is one of the 6 articles, does not sustain life. The second is also eliminated because gold and silver are not edible. And so is the third, as neither salt nor precious metals are grown in the soil. The illah is therefore the last attribute, which belongs to all the specified items in the hadith of riba. The difference between the two stages of reasoning is that in takhrij al-manat, the jurist is dealing with a situation where the illah is not identified, whereas in tanqih al-manat,
first you need to identify what is the illah. Once you identify it, you will have with it things that are not really from the illah.
Whereas in tanqih al-manat, more than one cause has been identified, and his task is to select the proper illah.
Okay. We will stop here inshallah and we will continue next time. هذا وصلى الله وسلم على محمد وصحبه أجمعين.